just as the Russia-Ukraine conflict appeared to be entering a sensitive phase. With discussions around dialogue channels and the potential for a more stable agreement, an incident in Makova has cast a shadow over all predictions. On the morning of December 22nd, during the peak of rush hour traffic, a car bomb detonated in the heart of the Russian capital. The explosion ripped through the morning commute, damaging several vehicles and injuring a number of people. However, it was not merely the time or place of the explosion that captured public attention, but the identity of the person inside the targeted vehicle. The victim was Lieutenant General Fanon Savarov, the head of the Operations Training Department of the Russian General Staff. His role was far from symbolic. He was directly involved in organizing and training the combat capabilities of the Russian army, making him a crucial link in the nation's military apparatus. Consequently, the incident was immediately perceived as an event of extraordinary significance. Russian investigators quickly announced that they could not rule out the involvement of Ukrainian special forces, while Kyiv, for its part, remained conspicuously silent. This silence, according to many analysts, has given rise to a series of pressing questions. If this was not just an isolated attack, what deeper calculations could lie behind the assassination of a high-ranking Russian general at such a critical juncture in the conflict? The death of a top military figure in the very heart of Russia's center of power was thus seen as something that transcended a typical criminal case. For many observers, it was a clear signal of a serious security vacuum, particularly within the context of Makova, long considered a highly protected zone. The fact that a member of the general staff could be targeted within its borders raises profound questions not only about the perpetrator, but also about how the security system was so effectively breached. The Russian Investigative Committee has stated it is actively considering the possibility that the incident is linked to Ukrainian special forces. Yet the official response from Kyiv has not materialized, and this continued silence has created a significant information gap. Into this void, numerous theories have emerged, ranging from the activation of long-standing underground networks to suspicions of support from sympathizers within Russian territory itself. While none of these assumptions have been confirmed with evidence, they all underscore the profound complexity of the event. From this point, major questions are beginning to surface. If Ukraine was indeed involved, how could such an operation be executed so deep within Russian territory, specifically in a city like Makova? Was this an isolated incident, or is it part of a broader series of targeted attacks against Russian military commanders that has been ongoing since the start of the protracted conflict? Given his pivotal role in combat training, how will the death of Lieutenant General Savarov impact the strategic calculations of both sides during this sensitive period? Therefore, the first question many analysts are asking pertains not to hastily identifying the culprit, but to understanding the method of action. In the landscape of modern conflict, such operations do not necessarily begin with the direct infiltration of external forces into enemy territory. In fact, the scenarios most often discussed are far more indirect and insidious. One prominent possibility is the existence of dormant networks, established early on, which operate independently and are only activated when a specific directive is given or an opportunity arises. Furthermore, some experts argue that individuals with Russian citizenship who may be dissatisfied with the current government could be lured or might voluntarily cooperate for personal, financial, or ideological motives. Additionally, the use of outsourced intermediaries or the provision of remote technical support is considered a viable method to minimize the risk of being directly traced. All of these scenarios exist in theory, but to date, no publicly available evidence has emerged to confirm any of them. The next critical question is why Makova, once considered the secure core of the nation, could become the stage for such an incident. Some analysts suggest that in the context of the prolonged Russia-Ukraine conflict, Russia has been forced to prioritize its resources for external fronts, spanning military to intelligence efforts, which has inevitably increased the pressure on its domestic security apparatus. Moreover, Makova is a sprawling megacity with an enormous population and a vast, intricate infrastructure. Achieving absolute control over all movement or covert activities within its limits is a virtually impractical task. From a broader perspective, many researchers argue that the very nature of modern conflict has changed significantly. Confrontational activities are no longer confined to traditional forms of warfare, but have expanded to include intelligence operations, sabotage, and selective actions aimed at creating powerful psychological and strategic effects. In this context, events occurring deep within enemy territory are seen as a key component of a protracted battle of wits. Regarding the potential motives, if Ukraine is involved, analyses often focus on the psychological and deterrent factors, demonstrating that high-ranking figures within the Russian military command can be targeted is believed to create a pervasive sense of insecurity among the elite. Simultaneously, it sends a powerful message that the rear areas are not entirely insulated from the consequences of the conflict. Other opinions view this as an indirect, retaliatory response to recent deep strike attacks on Ukrainian territory. However, it is crucial to remember that all of these arguments remain hypothetical. No official conclusions have been reached, and these theories merely reflect how public opinion and analysts are attempting to perceive the issue. Looking back at the developments in the Russia-Ukraine conflict over recent years, the incident in Makova is not an isolated case. A series of similar events have occurred previously, leading observers to gradually recognize a familiar, albeit unsettling pattern. In August 2022, Daria Dugina, the daughter of Russian scholar Alexander Dugin, was murdered when a car bomb exploded. In October 2023, military blogger Maxim Finn died after a disguised explosive device detonated in a public space in St. Petersburg. In December 2024, Igor Kirilov, the head of Russia's radiation, chemical, and biological defense forces, was assassinated in Makova, with Ukrainian security agencies later claiming responsibility for the act. And most recently, in October 2025, General Gerolf MCK became the victim of a car bomb explosion near the Russian capital. The common thread running through these events lies in the targets: individuals with ideological influence, media connections, or direct links to the military apparatus. The methods employed are often selective, utilizing small, hard-to-detect explosive devices. And the locations of these attacks have been progressively deeper inside Russian territory. According to many analyses, this series of incidents reveals a trend of silent escalation, in which confrontational activities are gradually shifting from the public sphere to more discreet and calculated actions. Based on these established precedents, the Makova incident therefore moves beyond mere assumptions about the perpetrators, and quickly raises questions about how both sides will adjust their responses in the next phase of the conflict. For many observers, Russia's reaction will be the first and most telling indicator of this event's actual impact on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Internally, Russia is expected to continue tightening security measures for its military commanders and other key figures within the state apparatus. Expanded surveillance and enhanced countermeasures are seen as a familiar and likely option, but they carry the inherent risk of fostering increased caution and paranoia among the elite, especially as security measures increasingly permeate public life. Some analyses suggest that this could, in turn, affect operational flexibility, particularly given that Moscow is already allocating its resources across multiple high-priority fronts. From a foreign policy and strategic perspective, Russia could leverage the incident to strengthen its arguments in international forums, while simultaneously seeking support or neutrality from its partners. Conversely, assuming Ukraine is involved, any psychological and symbolic benefits could be accompanied by significant risks, particularly the potential for eroding external support from its own allies. This delicate interplay of benefits and risks makes maintaining a gray area in its response a calculated choice for Kyiv, reflecting a concerted effort to maintain balance in a highly uncertain and volatile context. To date, there is no publicly available evidence confirming Ukraine's involvement in the assassination in Makova, and all analyses remain firmly at the level of strategic assumption. However, this event demonstrates that the Russia-Ukraine conflict is evolving in increasingly unpredictable ways. With the lines between the front lines and the rear becoming more blurred than ever before, safe spaces, even in the very centers of power, no longer seem to be a given. In this new context, the question is not only about which side will ultimately prevail, but also about the long-term costs that both sides, and indeed the wider region, will be forced to face as this new, shadowy chapter of the conflict unfolds.